Hello everybody, it's the Historical Gamer once again, and today we're returning to Strategic Command World War One, a new game which actually, by the time you're listening to this on YouTube anyway, has just come out on Steam today. The game comes out on December 5th for those of you watching on the Twitch stream, and we are into our second turn. It is August 15th of 1914. We fought the first turn of World War One. The Austro-Hungarian forces have had a forward defense of the Austro-Hungarian position. Historically, the Russians attacked in Galicia and drove the Austro-Hungarians back. I don't know if they took Przemysl or not, but they took, I believe, Lemberg. They threatened Krakow, and they really pushed the Austrians back to this mountain range where the Austrians were able to kind of reform and stop the Russians. But they did have a lot of initial successes driving the Austrians back. In this war, not yet, although the Russians are still mobilizing. It is still very early in the conflict, again, just the second week. But so far, we've given the Russians some bloody noses along the Russian front, and the intent is to continue delaying. And that's because we're actually substantially weaker on the Russian front than the Austrians were historically, because we've deployed the entire Austrian, which army is it? The entire Austrian, some Austrian army, doesn't give me a number, but we deployed 2 additional Austrian army corps against the Serbians in an effort to crush the Serbians more quickly. And so this is the historical Austrian mobilization plans, but not the ones that they actually followed, because in the midst of mobilizing, they realized, oh crap, we need to go ahead and we need to send supplies and troops against the Russians because they might overrun us. With that being said, we are focusing more heavily on the Serbians because the goal is to knock the Serbians out of the war as quickly as possible so that we can then shift those forces north to deal with the Russians. We would have a much stronger front against the Russians with these, 2, 4, 6, 7 additional infantry corps. Actually, 8 additional infantry corps would really fill in this front line pretty nice and allow us to counter the Russians much more effectively with the sick. Well, they're not really the sick man of Europe. They're kind of like the sick man of Europe Part 2. The Austro-Hungarian Empire. Also, the additional thing is that if you don't crush Serbia fast enough, that can embolden Romania to go to war against the Austrians. Additionally, if the Russians take Krakow over here, I believe that can also embolden the Romanians to go to war with the Austrians. So we want to keep the Romanians out of the war on the side of the Entente, and one way to do that is to crush these minor allies quickly. On the German front, we haven't been focusing as heavily against the French as historical. We haven't declared war on Belgium. We haven't swept through Belgium. And therefore, through the first turn of the game, the British have not declared war. The British are actually still neutral as we begin advancing into France. Now, our advance into France is going to be pretty slow going and pretty high casualties. We're not attacking Verdun directly. We're not going to attempt to attack the fortifications directly. And that's because that's just going to be a suicide endeavor. We're essentially following something more akin to the 1870s strategy of the Franco-Prussian War, except with a lot more troops. And so I don't envision we will seriously threaten Paris, but the goal is to get at least onto French territory enough so that any fighting, any damage that's done is done to the French economy and not to the German economy. We don't want the front to spread into the Ruhr, into the southern portions of Germany, where a lot of Germany's economic values are assembled. Meanwhile, we have deployed 2 additional infantry corps and 2 additional cavalry corps here to eastern Prussia to deal with the Russian menace here. And we actually are threatening Riga. We have some cavalry in here into the Baltic states region, moving toward Riga. But I don't know if we'll actually get there or not. All I can say is we've got a much more substantial force in eastern Prussia that's attempting to keep the Russians off balance. And that's the situation right now. My intention for this turn, turn number 2 in this game, is to actually take the city of Nancy, which is a French national morale center, so it'll hurt their morale if we take the city. It'll push us a little bit further into France, keep the French attention on the German front, this narrow front line, but then actually begin transporting some of our troops via rail to the east to assist in the conflict there. But as much as I would like to deploy them against the Russians in Austria-Hungary, because I think we could definitely stall the Russians if we do that, I think I'm also going to deploy a number of German units to the south, to Serbia, to attempt to assist the Austrians in crushing Serbia. If we can crush the Serbians very quickly, then we can shift all those forces north against the Russians, then we can crush the Russians, then we can turn all our forces west to deal with the French. I really want to take advantage of this lack of British declaration of war, and with a much narrower front, without us going to war with Belgium, this front is much more narrow, so we don't need as many troops to hold the line in a defensive conflict against the French, I don't think. And so as long as we have food and supplies coming through the North Sea, because the British are not yet at war with us, and as long as we don't have additional British forces arrayed against us, I want to use those extra German troops that we do have to crush Serbia, then crush Russia, then crush France. It's not the German strategy. The Germans thought that the French had to be defeated first before the Russians could fully mobilize. That was sort of their war logic. I'm going a little bit differently. My goal is to break the Entente up and defeat them one at a time in detail. So the goal is to isolate and defeat each individual enemy one at a time, and I think, knowing what we know about history, Serbia will be the easiest to conquer, Russia will be the second easiest to conquer, and then France and eventually Great Britain together will be the most difficult to conquer. And so that's going to be the order of things that we're going to go. Okay, so first things first, we're going to focus on Nancy here in France. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to advance these troops here to the east of Nancy. We're then going to go ahead and attack with these troops that are bordering Nancy. You can see here we did quite a few casualties. I think what was that, 3-1 or 4-1 or something like that. They're down to 5 men. We're going to go ahead and move this. Actually, maybe I don't want to move a cavalry unit in here. Let's pull these troops back. We'll move these troops out of the fort in Metz. They'll attack Nancy. They'll take some casualties and fall back. Then we'll move these troops forward here. And we'll move these troops forward. Okay, so Nancy is overwhelmed. We'll move these troops into Nancy, these troops who are adjacent to Verdun. And then Nancy is now ours. So that's good. We overwhelmed the French at Nancy. We didn't lose too many casualties. We lost maybe 3 or 4 men. The enemy lost a whole infantry corps. We're now going to attempt to expand the line a little bit further to the south. So we're actually going to go ahead and attack to the east of Nancy. So we'll go ahead and attack there. You can see that was another effective attack. These guys already attacked? They did. I'm going to operate this cavalry unit away from the front line. We're actually going to deploy them. I think we'll deploy the cavalry against the Russians. So I'm going to go ahead and deploy this cavalry over here to Stanislaw. I do want to deploy against the Serbians, but I don't think cavalry is going to do very well against trenches. So we'll get those against the Russians. Meanwhile, these guys already attacked. So these guys haven't. So we're going to pull these guys back, move these guys here. 3-3, so that was a pretty bloody exchange, but a good one nonetheless. And then the 3rd Bavarian Corps is going to attack as well. We'll destroy this unit here to the south. Interesting. So apparently, I can't actually, because of the way zones of control works, I can't actually advance troops into this hex to the south of Nancy. Damn it! Well, in any event, we did destroy a 2nd French corps just to the south of Nancy, so that'll hurt French morale, I think. Meanwhile, I am tempted to try and attack this other French corps here, also to the south. So we'll do that. 3-2. 2-1 in their favor. 3-3. There we go. We destroyed another French corps here in the Vosges Mountains. So 2 French corps, actually 3 French corps, 1 in Nancy, 1 to the east of Nancy, and then 1 in the Vosges, all along the French border here, all destroyed. Again, because of the zones of control rules, I can't actually move those troops in there. We're going to pull these troops back because they suffered heavy casualties. We're going to move these guys in. We'll reinforce the troops at Mühlhausen now that we have money to spend. And then we'll move these troops adjacent to Verdun. I don't think the troops in Verdun are going to attack because I think that'll actually lower their entrenchment levels. But in any event... Oh, I could move here. So I could move a cavalry unit into this hex. But I just think it's a bad idea. I think they're going to lose unnecessary casualties. So if the French want to move new infantry units in here and not entrench them because they won't be able to move and entrench the same turn, they can do that, and then we'll be able to defeat them again in detail. Meanwhile, we're going to spend money to reinforce our artillery to max. Most of these troops that do need reinforcements already moved, so we can't reinforce them. Interestingly enough, that these guys, the one infantry unit I didn't move here along the front line, is not on a rail line, so I can't operate them east. I can't operate these infantry here at Aachen to the east, and so we're going to deploy them against the Serbians. We'll rail them to... Actually, let's wait to rail them. Let's go ahead and attack Belgrade. So we've got the 12th Austrian Corps here to the southeast of Belgrade. We're going to go ahead and attack there. They're going to inflict 2 casualties while losing 2 of their own. Then they're going to slide in to the south of Belgrade to cut the capital off. At this point, the troops at Erd are also going to move south. The troops to the northwest of Belgrade are going to attack. They're going to inflict 3-1 casualties. The troops that we just moved from Erd are going to attack. They're going to inflict 2-1 casualties. And then the troops to the southwest of Belgrade are going to attack and inflict 1-1 casualties. And so Belgrade has now fallen to the Austro-Hungarian forces here. We'll move a garrison into the city. And now you can see we have taken the Serbian capital. And we are now driving south. We'll go ahead and attack these guys here. And we just destroyed a garrison here at Velevo, if that's how you pronounce it. I'm sure it's not, because I never pronounce anything correctly. Then we'll go ahead and attack these troops here in these entrenchments that are just east of the city. Move this garrison forward in front of Sarajevo. Move this corps north. And so we now have damaged very badly. There's 2 badly damaged Serbian corps. Actually, this one's the 3rd Army Corps, and then the Uzik Army Corps. Both are below 50% strength. Belgrade has fallen. 2 Serbian garrisons, one in Belgrade and one in this other city here, both destroyed. And the Austrian army is on the march against the Serbians, although taking somewhat heavy casualties, and they probably lack the steam to keep things moving. All right. So these guys are going to stay in put. We don't need those troops in Luxembourg. We're going to move the troops in Aachen. This army corps will move against the Serbians. The only question is where. So if I move them south here, I think that opens up a slot for the troops at Aachen to rail east. It does. Okay, so we'll rail these guys to the east of Sarajevo, so we're bringing a German army corps in there. This cavalry unit's not on board a rail line, so they can't actually move. You know... Part of me says we should move there. I don't think these guys are entrenched. They do have good ground, though. Nah, forget about it. We're going to move these guys back to Nuremberg just so we remember that we want to rail them to the east. Reinforce that guy. Move these guys back toward Nuremberg as well. Okay, so, and then we're going to have a bunch of additional troops that are going to spawn up near, I think, Frankfurt or Cologne, that we can then rail to the east as well as part of our effort of shifting troops to deal with the eastern threat. Nonetheless, a good day for the German army against the French, destroying 3 entire French army corps, which would probably hurt their national morale, and will also move one of our headquarters. when the time comes. Not quite yet ready to do that, but once the time comes, we will move one of our army corps to the east as well, or army headquarters. Oh, I forgot. We also have another corps up here near Flensburg. So I'm assuming the Danes are not going to go to war with us, so we'll move that corps as well, and it will move toward Temsburg, if that's how you pronounce it. Maybe I should move them into Belgrade. Can they move into Belgrade? They can. No, they can't. But they can move one away from Belgrade. Yeah, we'll do that. So we're going to move those troops to the north of Belgrade. So we've moved 2 German Army infantry corps and 1 cavalry corps to the east, although not to the same place. We'll move a 3rd Army Corps and a 2nd Cavalry Corps to the east next turn, as well as a headquarters unit. How different is this from the Great Commander of the Great War? Groggy, we actually just had a podcast episode last night that hasn't posted yet, where we talked about that. And I think Commander of the Great War is still the best World War I turn-based strategy game that I've ever seen. But it's an interesting... I think this is a good game. I think what this lacks, though, is there's no real sense, in my opinion, of maneuver combat in the Western theater, or not as sufficient as there should be, in my opinion. So I think that's a key thing that it's really lacking, in my opinion, is it just doesn't do a good job of modeling the maneuver combat that did exist historically in this campaign in the early days of the war. Okay, so we're continuing our drive on Riga. We've taken Chavli and also Matu. We have 2 infantry corps and a cavalry corps moving to the north. Meanwhile, I'm also going to attack the troops in Poland at Kutnow with the 20th German Corps. We'll attack them with the Landwehr Corps from Gradez. We'll move this garrison in here to attack them as they retreat. And we'll move these guys in as well. Okay. So moving small formations in here to threaten Poland as well. So Poland, Kutnow has been attacked. Meanwhile, the troops at Memel are going to move on Libau. The troops in Königsberg are also going to move that way. This air unit's going to reinforce. We have 2 armies in the east, one at Tilsit under von Bülow, and then we have von Hindenburg, a little bit in sort of western eastern Prussia. I want to take Grodau, if I can. There's a garrison force here. Okay, it doesn't look like I can get those troops far enough south. Reinforce these troops. And we'll move these guys south toward Johannesburg. So we do have a little bit of a gap in our line at Gumden, which the Russians may well try and split our lines here and drive between us. Certainly a possibility. Dan Carlin's Hardcore History Armageddon World War I series is really good. Yeah, there was definitely maneuver combat up to the Battle of the Marne. And I think Commander of the Great War does a better job of that, of the best game of modeling the sense that you're really rolling through Belgium and you're approaching Paris and you've got momentum behind you and there's room to maneuver and it's the enemy's hanging on by the skin of their teeth and you're almost there and you're almost there and you're almost there and then that door gets slammed shut right in front of your face. The best game to ever model that, in my opinion, is Commander of the Great War. And in this game, I've tried it 2 or 3 times to roll through Belgium, and maybe it's because it's 2 week turns, I don't know, but it just feels like a slog. It just feels like you're just kind of grinding the enemy down. It feels more like a 1918 offensive where just weight of numbers is kind of starting to help you overwhelm and just kind of slowly roll them back. You know, turn 1, you'll take Liège and maybe Brussels. Turn 2, you might take Lille. The furthest I've gotten is by like turn 4, which is kind of the middle of September. We've gotten to Boulogne, Lille, and kind of threatened Amiens, but we've never really gotten to close to Paris. Tortuga, who I was talking to about it, he did manage to take Reims, but he took it with like 2 cavalry corps, and they had like a very narrow front. Like I've never seen an actual sense where there's this giant wing that's sweeping through Belgium. Okay. All right, so meanwhile, I think that does it for Eastern Prussia. We've already done Serbia. We've done the Western Front. So now I think what we need to focus on is we need to focus on the Austrian front with the Russians. So we've got this cavalry corps here at Przekorov that we're going to go ahead and fall back behind Czernowitz. It's just too weak, and I don't think we can reinforce it that far to the front. Plus, if we do send fresh reinforcements in, they'll quickly get killed. We'll fall this infantry unit back here to Czernowitz, kind of in their front to guard the border there. Meanwhile, we've got this corps to the northeast of Sambor. We've also got a corps at Lemberg. I'm going to attack with these troops at Tarnopol against this Russian corps. We'll shift the troops over in these oil fields there as well. Okay. Let's focus on this Russian cavalry here to the northeast near Krakow, or the Polish city. It's in Austria-Hungary at this point, obviously in the war. We'll fall this cavalry back into these forts. Move these guys east. Then we'll have this cavalry move over here and overwhelm that Russian cavalry unit. So threatening Prussia or Poland from 2 sides with some Austrian troops moving north here. The Germans knocked the Russians back out of the fortifications near Kutnau, but they didn't actually take the city. We're going to lose Tarnopol next turn. Part of me wants to advance this corps from Lemberg. Yeah, these guys are going to get swarmed by the Russians next turn. They'll take Tarnopol. They'll probably also take the oil wells. They'll retake their territory in Prosekov. They'll reinforce these air units. Meanwhile, I think there's something up here where we can... I don't quite know. There's some way where you can transfer reserves or reinforcements between countries, but I can't remember exactly how you do that. Germany has 87 MPPs left. We probably want to spend some of that getting our fleet up to snuff. Some of our ships are not yet fully ready for sea, not fully mobilized. So we'll get these armored cruisers up as best we can. Move the first Bismarck back. Well, actually, let's move this like sub over this way. Meanwhile, I guess one other thing we can do is there's a Russian destroyer here in the Gulf of Riga. So go ahead and move a armored cruiser here against it. You can see it does 2 to 5 damage, so pretty heavy damage. We'll move a light cruiser, the Danzig, up here to try and finish it off. Doesn't quite go that way. Our sub also attacks it. Does some damage. Then we've got 2 destroyers of our own down here. We didn't do any more damage. All right, let's send the armored cruiser, the Rune, up here. Still can't finish the bastard off. This is one tough Russian destroyer. We still didn't finish him off. Oh my god. Well, that was embarrassing. I mean, we damaged him real bad, but we couldn't finish the bugger off. For fuck's sake, that Russian cruiser. All right. Convoy map? Where's the convoy map? Cheeto, do you know where the convoy map is? Is it the war map? Oh, here it is. Convoy map. Okay, left click for convoy information. Germany supplies Austria, Hungary. It is okay. So this is interesting. This is something that's a little bit different from the previous strategic command. My understanding is in the previous strategic command, you could only transport supplies via sea. And so you could provide extra supplies to the Russians by putting a lot of reinforcements or a lot of MPPs into your sea convoy routes. However, in this game, I believe you actually have land convoy routes too. So Germany can supply Austria-Hungary. You see this little yellow line, that represents a railway line. And so if we actually close this map and we move on to the railway line, it's here. It's this blue line between Vienna and Berlin, which represents Germany supplying overland resources to the Austro-Hungarian Empire. And so I think that's pretty cool. I think the ability to supply troops overland is a neat addition to the game. Libyan supply shipments to Italy. Italy's not in the war. France also apparently can supply MPPs to Serbia. You can see this naval route here between France and Serbia. The British can supply to Russia through this convoy route. The Canadians to Britain, obviously. The U.S. to Britain. And then there are other routes. Egyptian supply shipments to the U.K., which I'm assuming will be cut off, assuming the UK and the Ottomans end up going to war to each other. And then there's the Algerian supply shipments into France. There's also Russian supply shipments, I'm assuming to Serbia over this rail route here. Although I think we've interdicted. No, we haven't. So that rail route goes from Russia through Romania and through Romania into Serbia, into Niš. So if we take Niš, that will cut any resources that Russia can send to Serbia, and that will presumably hurt their economy a bit. But I think one thing we're going to do is we are going to send some supplies from Germany to Austria-Hungary, because Germany is obviously the far stronger member of that partnership. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to send, I think, 10% of the German economy, 40 MPPs almost, to the Austro-Hungarian Empire to keep it strong. The Austro-Hungarian Empire convoy, it doesn't even have any convoys. It can only be the recipient. So that's a thing. All right. So we're doing that. Meanwhile, Austria-Hungary still has 204 MPPs. Trying to see if there's anything we can actually reinforce. I think we've already kind of done... Well, the Austro-Hungarian Navy could definitely be reinforced. But most of our troops have moved, which would prevent them from being able to draw reinforcements here. Yeah, so they can't move. We've already reinforced our first recon bombers in the Austro-Hungarian Empire. We have 200 MPP left, and so with that money, I'm going to spend it on upgrading our armored cruisers and our pre-dreadnought battleships, mobilizing the Austrian Navy for war. Obviously, the Austrians aren't going to defeat the French Navy in a stand-up fight, but as much as we can get ready for war with our Navy, the better. I'd rather not spend absurd amounts of money on the Navy trying to get it up to snuff. So these guys can move one hex down there to interdict that supply route. We're also going to set these destroyers here to interdict supplies coming from France into Serbia. And then we're going to send our one dreadnought down here adjacent to this port. Not actually going for the convoys, but trying to reduce the port's effectiveness. You can see currently the port is supplies are 10, and it's bringing in supplies into Serbia via this naval route. So the Austrian fleet is going to go ahead and blockade these guys, while the rest of the Austrian fleet gets ready for war. The French Navy is definitely stronger than the Austrians, but without the Italians involved, I'm not too worried about the French deploying their entire navy into the Adriatic. And so that's the situation on August 15th. Let's go ahead and end the turn and see what happens, and move on forward. All right, everybody, this is going to conclude it for this episode of Strategic Command World War I, a new game out by Fury Software, the developers of the Strategic Command War in Europe and World at War series. This is our part 2 of this series, playing as the Central Powers. We're focusing on the Eastern and the Serbian fronts while minimizing the importance of the French front. Nonetheless, we still were able to take Nancy and have some limited successes in the West to keep the French off guard and drawing the casualty list up. So overall, things seem to be going reasonably well, although certainly no World War II style blitzkrieg. Overall, I'm enjoying my time with the game so far. It is very different from Strategic Command 2, but also very similar in certain ways. And we'll probably dive into that more in future episodes, but this seems like a good stopping point, so we're going to go ahead and wrap this one up. I hope you guys enjoy the series and the episode. Let me know your thoughts below as always, and until next time, this is the Historical Gamer saying thank you for watching, and I'm out.